All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Here.
Glenn Sarka.
Here.
James Hewitt.
Here.
Jennifer Cliff.
Here.
Jennifer Ray.
Here.
Cheryl Maddox Smith.
Here.
Jason Zadunik.
Here.
All right, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
All right. Motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mr. Sarka. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Cambenzi, and everybody for coming this evening. My mic is a little bit louder than I'm used to. It sound okay?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to start with the Gray Brett Elevator Project, and I'm going to invite Isaac Roberts from GEI up to the podium to give us a little bit of context as far as a timeline. Hopefully this isn't a surprise to you, Mr. Roberts, and your supervisor gave you a heads up. But anyway, just so the board's aware, this is a project we've been working on for quite some time. You gave approval for the project in October of 2022. The contract was signed in February of 23, and I would say work was started in earnest right around the end of the school year, June of 23. And then we recently ran into some snags with the project, and the elevator is currently not operational as of the start of school. So that's clearly a concern and one that's been addressed in conversations and emails with folks from Otis and GEI, both of whom are here today to give some clarification. So start with GEI to give some context and a timeline perhaps, and then bring the folks up from Otis to clarify the snags or the issues that we've had and why we're in the situation that we are now.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So, project began probably a year and a half ago when Zach came to GEI saying he wanted to modernize the elevators at Gray Brett and Bothwell. We originally sent the project out to bid not this past spring, but the spring before that. We received one bid from Otis, but it was an incomplete bid, so we had to rebid the project. So we rebid the project in the summer. Otis provided a complete bid through contracting and whatnot. We had the signed agreement in early 2023 with an anticipation date planned before school starts. Otis arrived, I believe, mid-June to start working on the project, and prior to school starting, that's when we discovered that the hole for the cylinder is out of plumb, and the new cylinder for the project, or for the elevator, cannot be accommodated for the new elevator, and so that's why Otis and GI are here for the change order to have the hole re-drilled so that the cylinder can be installed to have a plumb elevator in working condition.
Are you asking questions of GEI or?
Right, yeah, I know the board's going to steer this conversation. Isaac, can you speak to the price of the change order, the cost
I
associated?
believe Otis has a base bid of $100,000 roughly with potential overtime charges. Given the nature of the project, work can't be completed during school hours, so the work will have to be done after hours, nighttime, weekend work, such like that, so that the work's not being done while children are in session.
So if I remember correctly, the change order was $116,000, and with unknowns related to overtime, could be upwards of $150,000 or more. Is that accurate?
Sounds accurate. 150, 160. Yeah.
Right, and the project initially was already quite high, which we had concerns about 303,000 perhaps. So with the change order, 303,000, with the change order, we could be approaching upwards of $500,000.
Yep.
When was the original hole? Oh, sorry, when was the original hole drilled?
That was done with when the elevator was originally installed in the 70s, I believe.
And the fact that it's not level or not plumb, does that explain?
I can't hear.
Just be bad with that.
Yeah. Otis could probably give some more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead and
Instruct me on how to use my microphone too. Sure.
Thanks.
Perhaps Isaac, if you want to just stay close by there in case we need you to step back up.
Yep.
Yeah, so when the code that was in play when the elevator was originally installed allowed for a single bottom steel cylinder. So if you can imagine, can you pull up the picture that I sent you earlier, Zach? It could be helpful to have a visual aid.
This one?
Yeah, so can you folks in the board see the cylinder on this drawing? So we're talking about a hydraulic elevator, and so there's like a piston and a ram, and so it's hydraulic fluid pushes the piston that raises and lowers the elevator, and that piston is housed in a cylinder that's buried underground. And so as high up in the air as the elevator goes, that's how far down to the ground the cylinder goes. In this particular case at Gray Barrett, that elevator has a 50-foot rise. So that cylinder is down in the hole 50 feet, and there's a piston inside of it, and then there's a pump motor that pumps oil to push that piston up and down and move the elevator through the hoistway. So going back to my original comment, the code that was in play at that point in time allowed for just a steel cylinder in ground. And so now current code, they require that cylinder to be cased in PVC. The reason why we replace the cylinders is because they're made of steel, and over the course of time, electrolysis causes them to rust. And if you wait too long, you're not proactive with replacing them, it'll actually rust through and oil will begin leaking into the ground. So now current code requires that the new cylinders are cased in PVC. So the new hole that we need is a little bit wider to allow for the Schedule 40 PVC. More oftentimes than not, we can make the existing hole work. In this case, the existing hole is out of plumb. So it worked for the old steel cylinder that had a shorter, smaller diameter. Now that we pulled that old steel cylinder out of the ground and we're trying to put this new cylinder in that's cased in PVC, it's wider, we can't fit it into the ground. And so we need to re-drill the hole to accommodate for the new cylinder. And there's no way for us to know that in advance. If you could flip to the other picture that I sent you. So again, the cylinder is buried underground, so we can't see it. So this is the picture. This is not the Gray Barrett Middle School or elementary school elevator. This is just a hydraulic elevator pit. So what you see right here, the shiny object that's coming up, that's actually the piston of the elevator, and then what that is going into is the cylinder, which is buried underground. So we can see about the top foot to 2 feet of the cylinder. We can't see anything else. There's no way for us to determine whether something is plumb or out of plumb. More oftentimes than not, we can make the existing hole work. In this case, unfortunately, we can't. And we've exhausted some measures to see if there's any alternatives to keep costs down. And unfortunately, there's not. We have to re-drill the hole. So, does that make sense to everyone?
What's your best guess as to how long this lasts, this new cylinder?
How long the cylinder is going to last?
Yeah.
I mean, at least 30 years.
We got
None of us will be in this room
Okay.
when this new one fails. So there'll be it's a long, useful life, very long-term, useful life.
So some follow-up that we've heard through administration, kind of some of the same information that you've stated, but we wanted to hear, directly from you guys at this meeting tonight, so we had some questions kind of prepared, a little bit in advance to this topic. But so going back to the timeline, just to help us understand, again, I totally get that you can't see, only maybe the top foot of that pit, but if you're on site in June and start taking things apart, start going into the process of the project, how does it then take until, the middle or early part of August before we find out that you finally got to the cylinder?
So clarification, we started, it was mid-July when we started. So we have long lead time for our material. We didn't start the project until mid-July. It took several weeks to get to that point in the project where we pulled the cylinder. We're at a point where we would go to install the new cylinder, and that's when we found out. As soon as I found out, I immediately sent an email to Zach to let him know where we were at, and I believe that was on August 15th.
Okay. So depending on if the cylinder was in plumb and not an issue, I guess, do you still feel that the timeline you would have had the project completed?
We'd be done. We were tracking to be done, yes.
So this is like the final stage of the installation or the improvements?
This particular project, it was. Yeah, this project we were tracking to be done. The cylinder was arriving late. We've had tons of material backlogs. The cylinder was arriving late. We had a promised ship date, so we came and started the elevator without the cylinder. The guys got to work at Gray Barrette without the cylinder, did a bunch of prep work, the modernization essentially without the cylinder. I came and delivered the cylinder, I believe the first or second week of August. The end of the first week of August, I delivered the cylinder, and they immediately got to work on the cylinder, just because once we do have that out of ground, a lot of times we require another contractor to come in and maybe just clean the hole out for us, is usually what happens when the hole does work. But we were tracking to be done.
Is there, and I don't know, again, depending on to what detail, what extent, I don't know, but there were also comments from some Gray Barrette custodians who, were on site during the summer when your employees were there. And one comment was made that they noticed anyway that employees were being called off to go to other jobs, other projects. Could that have led to delays at all in where you were in the process in your timeline?
I would say no. I mean, maybe we would have found out a couple days sooner, but I think we'd all still be here tonight discussing this. I mean, I don't think it, may have saved us a couple days if we wouldn't have been pulled off the project. So.
Okay.
We were working overtime. We were working 5 days a week on that job, 5 tens. I had pulled the crew off. They had another job for 2 days, I think, during the duration of the project. But I was confident with how we were tracking that we could still finish even pull them off.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think that the main thing that we're struggling with is not necessarily the result of needing to potentially look at drilling, right, as a way to resolve this issue. It also, I think, is paired with, or maybe exacerbated by, the cost of labor quotes. And again, we're just trying to figure out the timeline. A lot of this, as mentioned, would need to be done after school hours, therefore needing potential overtime rates for, if I understand it right, you and the drilling company, right? There needs to be an Otis employee present.
Right.
As supervising the project?
It's a code requirement.
So again, I don't know what the standard response is when you run into things like this with other vendors. Again, was the consideration made that, potentially waiving the overtime rate to try to, again, it seems to us, based on the numbers we saw in the change order, that the largest percentage of the cost is going to be mainly man hours and labor versus, eating up that up to $160,000. So again, I don't know if you have given, again, a consideration to looking at, discounts ways, for a public entity. I don't know if it's different for a private company versus, public, but.
Yeah, no, we've already discounted our rates significantly. I know it probably doesn't look that when we're looking at the hourly rate, but those are significant discounts. I can talk to my general manager, see if there's anything else we can do. Majority of it's coming right from the drilling company. There's nothing we can do about that piece. That's the $116,000 that Zach alluded to. Yeah.
So the overtime rate of $400 an hour is a discount?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
It's the standard rate.
Our standard regular time rate is $500 an hour, regular time.
And your straight time hourly rate is what?
Our regular time hourly rate is $500 an hour.
And what is overtime?
If it's during the week, it's 1.7 times that, so I think that would be $8.50 an hour.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Which
standard.
we acknowledge is a lot. I don't want to get into the finances of an elevator company, but yeah, we don't make any money when we install a new elevator. We make it on the service and the repair side. So yeah.
Could you also, speak to, and maybe Isaac could help out on this as a joint answer, but has everything, you said everything's been exhausted, but could you just, I guess, elaborate more on that as to an alternative, right? Is there a way to somehow, because there's also made mention of an obstruction, like 28 feet down, I believe, in the pit?
Yep. So we actually went to Graver earlier today. There is an obstruction, but we also went to go plumb the hole. The hole is out of plumb, so even if we take off, remove that obstruction, we're still in the same circumstance. We still need to re-drill the hole. So, and we looked at doing a telescopic piston in lieu of just a regular piston. Unfortunately, the state won't allow for it. They require Schedule 40 PVC, and they won't allow a variance to use anything with reduced diameter, if that makes sense. So we've been in conversations with the state. We've got our engineering team involved. We've looked at several options, and we still arrived at where we're at right now.
Can you help too, again, just as far as, obviously none of us are elevator experts. If this hole, existing hole, is so out of plumb, like, could you speak to how that other elevator was in operation for 50 plus years, whatever, and it operated in our minds okay? Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm gonna let you.
Sure.
you guys
So,
answer.
prior code, when this was installed, like Vern talked about, we could take that cylinder. So this existing cylinder was about 8 inches in diameter at Graverette when we pulled it out. The new one is roughly about the same size. But new code mandates we take that cylinder and we encase it in PVC. The PVC keeps that cylinder away from groundwater electrolysis. It extends the life of that, and it also allows us to monitor if there's any oil leaking out of it. We can pressurize it and purge the system of the oil. That PVC has an outside diameter of about 11 inches right now. So we're taking an existing 8-inch cylinder that was at Graverette, and when we pulled that off, it was pushed all the way to one side of the hole, which alludes to us that that hole wasn't plumbed. They had to literally push it to one side just to get that cylinder plumbed. And now we have an 11-inch. So we have an 11-inch PVC. Hole is 12 inches in diameter. That's a ½ inch on each side. So a 50-foot hole in 50 feet can't be any more than a ½ inch out of plumb. I used to drill holes for a living. I used to do this exact thing. It's unrealistic. It's not possible. So, and we've looked at in the state of Michigan, they have different products instead of the Schedule 40 PVC that you can wrap the 8-inch cylinder in that serves the same function. The state of Michigan is not allowed. I've asked the chief elevator inspector for a variance, and he says if it can't meet every section of, it's actually Rule 43 for Michigan code. If it doesn't meet every section of it, he won't even accommodate a variance. And the first thing is Schedule 40 PVC.
So I guess he's basically speaking of the tolerance of the hole.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so we were going from an 8-inch in with 12-inch. Like, for example, now if we take our 11-inch PVC that we're putting in there, if we have an 18-inch hole, it can be out of plumb somewhat.
Right.
But we have the tolerance to be able to straighten it out.
You didn't know what the diameter of this hole was until you got to August, though?
Correct, yeah. So in that picture, you can see there's actually a different colored concrete. After, and it's been a code for many, many years, after a cylinder is put in the ground, it has to be sealed off from groundwater intrusions, and that the casing, that 12-inch casing we're talking about, so there is a steel casing in this hole. The top 28 feet is below grade, and it's covered in concrete, which anywhere from 4 to 8 inches of concrete. So we have no way to see it.
So prior to ordering a cylinder, we don't chip all the concrete out to see the size of the casing.
Is it fair to say the majority of existing holes you come across are not as narrow as this one is?
I would say so. My guess would be probably when this was installed in
It was 71.
71. My guess is the drilling equipment wasn't that sophisticated, and it's clearly all rock. And they probably went as small as they could just to make it as fast as they could for drilling that hole.
And typically, we have more tolerance to no hole is ever perfectly straight.
But 12 inches is pretty small.
Okay. I'll just make sure I didn't miss anything here. Anybody else, if you have another question, please feel free to jump in.
So the drilling won't be, it'll be at night.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So is that going to affect our neighbors at all? Because, I mean, we are in a residential area. Is it going to be too loud outside of the building or just in the building?
It's a lot of it will be contained inside the building. It'll be about a 25-foot air compressor with 4-inch air line that's going to be running outside. But it's a diesel engine running like high RPMs. So, I mean, it might. I can't say for sure about the residents that live around there, but I mean, the more notice we have, if we can put notices on people's doors that there's going to be some noise going on, as much information to the public as possible. But it's either I know for sure the kids will not be able to learn with the drilling inside the building. It would be impossible. It's extremely loud.
And then you said that you guys didn't start the project till middle of July.
That's accurate.
And school got out middle of June.
Yeah, so couple factors. Material lead time is grown for us. It grew during the project. And then also we have other projects going on too. And so we can't just stop a different project to start a new project on set date, right? So we had to wait for all material to arrive, and then we also had to wait for crew availability. In this case, I believe it was mainly material though.
Yeah, it was material.
Yeah.
So we got the cylinder at the beginning of August, and we found that out within 2 weeks. Actually, when we obtained the cylinder physically.
Yeah. No, it's a very tough pill to swallow. Obviously, for anybody, let alone a public institution. But having a change order that comes in, 50% of what the original project cost would have been. So again, trying to establish, obviously you can't stay in business very long if you're not making money. That's pretty understandable. But trying to figure out, is there a way that had the project, been moving along at a proper pace, would it have been enough time to figure it out, get the hole re-drilled prior to the start of school? Because again, those overtime hours, like you mentioned, they're all about 1.7. So that changes a $160,000 bill down to 90. So I guess the other couple of things, just to, I think, kind of tie a bow on this, as it was mentioned earlier too, we wanted upgrades to be happening on other buildings within the district too. Are there ways that we can, number one, obviously try to avoid a similar situation in one of the other buildings, or two, is there a way to additional cost savings, for these other projects that we have? I don't know if that's been, discussed, from your side of the table as far as, what we can do with, in addition to the Gray Barrette project.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at everything. With Gray Barrette, I think we had a signed contract for the work in early February. Materials were ordered shortly thereafter. We were running into a situation, and unfortunately it happened kind of mid-project, if you will, like shortly after the contract was signed, where, for example, the cylinder lead times used to be 6 weeks. It went from 6 weeks to 14 weeks, like in March, April timeframe, right when we executed the contract for this work. So when we placed the order for the cylinder, we thought we would have it like in late May, like Memorial Day weekend timeframe, and we didn't get it until, first week of August. So that, from our, I know it doesn't matter at this point, but there's things on our end that we think we know, but sometimes until we get into it, until we place an order for material, and we might get news that, hey, sorry, our 10-week lead time just grew to 24 weeks. So it can obviously making scheduling these projects a little more difficult. To your comments about setting up future projects, I would say, the more advanced notice, the better. I took this project over for a previous account manager, so I kind of got involved kind of late in the game. I know that there was kind of some back and forth between Otis Legal and Marquette Schools Legal, which is very common. It happens in every project, most projects. the sooner the better we can get something executed in advance. And schools are difficult too. You have a 3-month window basically to get a project done. And this particular project is typically, without overtime, typically a 9 to 10 week project. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in between when we start and when we finish to be able to get the project from start to finish done in the summertime, if that makes sense. So logistically, it can be difficult.
Sure.
Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
Going back to President Campenzi's question about the noise, it's obviously in a suburban setting, it's a high-density urban setting. How long do you anticipate that portion when we're going to be, there's diesel running and the air compressor? How many, are we talking a week? Are we talking a couple days? Are we talking 7 days?
I think we're looking at like 2 weeks, approximately 2 weeks is our hope.
Follow up on that actually too. I think I remember seeing either if it was in emails that were shared by the superintendent or whatever it may be, but I think you looked at 3 different drilling companies before you gave your recommendation.
We looked at it. Well, I think we called just whatever drilling company in the UP to see if they could accommodate, to obviously to keep costs down. We primarily work with 2. I did get an estimate from a third based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is very specialized. You need very special equipment. The rock underneath Grave Red is limestone and granite, so you need to have a special drilling rig to be able to accommodate that, to be able to fit it into the building, fit it into the hoistway, while still being effective. So there's not a lot of drilling companies out there that have that capability. So we did obtain pricing from 3. We are going with the most cost competitive, and also who we feel is going to be the fastest. So.
Oh, okay. That was going to be maybe I misread the email because I thought the one that you were recommending seemed like it actually had a longer quote for lead time.
There was one that had a fixed cost, and then there's one that had a time and material cost. The vendor who provided the time and material estimate, we work with him frequently. We're not real confident in his ability to drill through limestone and granite, so we don't want this to go from a 2-week project to a 6-week project. So that was the basis for our recommendation. So.
Do you have an approximate amount of hours of what the overtime, how many hours that's going to be to get this thing done now?
Yeah, so it would be, we're hoping, I don't have an exact, we're hoping it's 2 weeks, so it would be 80 hours times our overtime rate. And that's an estimate. I can't sit here and promise you, but yeah.
And that's 2 people. Is it going to be one to oversee it, or just the labor?
One's going to be a standby elevator mechanic, which is required by code, and then the drilling company, I believe, is going to have at least 2 folks on site.
Okay, so it's just one Otis individual.
Correct.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Can I just jump in here again? A couple points of clarification from the original contract. First, I thought there was a provision that there should be an acceptable schedule provided based on the contract. And the second point is the original budget for drilling, if it were necessary, was approximately $35,000. That's part of my concern with this type of cost.
Yeah, that was a mistake on our part. Again, I inherited this from a previous Otis rep. That was a mistake. It should have been much higher. I'll be honest with you, I would not have expected it to be this high. I would have estimated, probably 85,000. It's different in Michigan than it is in Wisconsin. We do a lot of business in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, we don't have to have a standby elevator mechanic. It's, the drilling company can do their drilling work on their own. So that's not an item that we run into in Wisconsin. But unfortunately, we have to provide a standby mechanic in Michigan as a code requirement.
And I will say the majority of our projects, Mark can probably verify, 98% of our projects we do like this don't require it to be re-drilled. I've been in this position for over 3 years. We haven't had to drill one yet, so we haven't reached out for drilling pricing for probably at least 3 years. A lot of times we pull it out, the casing's plenty big, we just have to clean out the hole, and then we go do our work. So in all honesty, we haven't reached out for drilling work in a long time. So that's just how rare this situation is.
And also it hurts us that we can't use the rubber liner that brings down the diameter quite a bit. We have to use Schedule 40 PVC here in Michigan, so we can get away with a lot more in Wisconsin too.
So I have a question. You say that it was your mistake, that it was, you first estimated 35,000, and that was part of the contract, correct?
So it was an estimated cost. It wasn't like we were promising a certain amount in the event of drilling work. But yeah, that was in I think the initial proposal estimated cost if required.
A mistake we have to eat then?
Yeah, well, we're reducing our rates. I will say that you have other elevators that are kind of in the same circumstance, and luckily in this case, you prepared for it. We have the cylinder, so is the elevator down longer than we want it to be? Absolutely. But this, you could have one of your elevators go down tomorrow, and then we have to order that cylinder with a 16-week lead time and then do all the other work. So I guess in this case, at least we're being proactive, and your elevator won't be down as long.
So this will be my last point, but in preliminary conversations, as we work through the details of this project, and a reminder that it was signed in October of 22, or approved in October of 22 by the board, and then signed somewhere in the early February of 23. So there was significant lead time for ordering parts well in advance of the end of school. And granted, you guys had other projects, but in terms of thinking in advance of a project, I can't imagine planning much further in advance than we did here. Perhaps that's just because I haven't had experience with elevators, but this project has been in the works for quite some time. Also, want to make sure I note that obviously as an educator, the safety and well-being of our kids and staff is of utmost importance. So starting the year in a building that has, 3+ stories above ground and then a story below ground creates all kinds of hardship. Fortunately, we aren't aware of anybody with mobility challenges that is being negatively impacted, but at any point in time that can be a situation that would be greatly impacted by this project delay.
Sure.
And that's my biggest concern of any other, and I did everything I could to prevent this type of conversation. So I need that to be said. I also want to make note that we have Kaufman Auditorium in that same building. It's a very often used venue by our school district and community. It's a theater. And I'm concerned that even though it may not be during school hours, it could be during an event, a performance, what have you, in Kaufman Auditorium. I know the generator is going to be outside, and I've heard diesel generators. I have a good understanding with that noise level. But what about, I'm imagining drilling concrete, my experience with drilling concrete, even though it's in the basement, in a pit, so to speak, I have to imagine that sound could easily travel into the auditorium on the first floor. Yep. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So it's going to be paramount, assuming the board gives me approval to move forward, gives us approval, gives you approval to move forward, it's going to be paramount that there's very clear communication on when you're going to be in that building, even after hours, because I'm going to have to loop in our Kaufman director and make sure that we're not doing this during events. Could it be another wrinkle that we weren't necessarily expecting?
I think we'd be fine with that. We'd easily be able to work around that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it all comes back to if the drilling company says, here's a week that we're available, and you come back and say, well, there's an event that in the auditorium, then I guess there's the decisions that have to be made. Are we moving forward with the event in the auditorium, or are we going to drill a hole? The guys just don't have an option to drill quietly. It's just.
So are they traveling from, I assume they're traveling from out of town?
They travel from Pennsylvania.
So, right. So, again, with unknown dates at this point, I do know we have a Kaufman calendar that's set.
Sure.
And I have a hard time imagining easily finding a week or more. You said 2 weeks or more?
As an estimate, yeah.
It's uncertain. They could start to a point too and see like, hey, you have this deadline to get done and can't make it.
If they're here and they start on a Monday and a Thursday at night, there's something in the auditorium at 8 p.m., they deal with us all the time. They'll shut it down and go back and sleep for the night and start again the next day. They don't have any problem with that. They deal with it all the time.
I'd say a one-day event
Yeah.
is going to be just fine.
But I know that the date they gave us for the first availability was far, it was like a month
It was
out.
October 26th, I believe, is
So,
when they can start, yeah.
I mean, we can take a look at the calendar then, we can coordinate with the company before they even come out.
How recent was that date given to start in October 26th?
I asked them to hold the date 2 weeks ago.
It's held right now, in theory?
Yeah, in theory.
I think the only other follow-up I also learned, I guess, you were there again today, right? So that was, had you shared all the new information that you learned from today that just confirmed everything that you've already said? There's no other, you don't need to go back and reevaluate, you don't have any other recommendation?
No.
Yeah.
One thing the board should consider is that since receiving that change order, we have sent Otis a revised change order that has some language recommended by our attorney. And that was shared with Otis, and I believe we're waiting to hear back after you hear from legal counsel.
Yeah, so I received that on Friday, and I forwarded it to my attorney, and I'm waiting on their feedback.
Okay.
So I would think we should be able to turn something around pretty quickly.
So the board, it'll be a little different than normal practice as far as what you approve. The current change order as written isn't necessarily the one that we're going to be able to move forward with. So you might have to consider some options, potentially giving me authority, whatever the board determines the best course of action would be for moving forward on this, since we don't have all the updated information. I gotta leave that up to you all. But at this point, Mr. Lampman, do you have anything you want to add? Mr. Lampman's been very helpful in this process.
Well, I guess the point I'd like to stress is when we were reviewing the original contract, you're Otis, you're the elevator company. When you put an estimate in the contract saying that if the hole had to be re-drilled, the estimated cost is $35,000. We're placing reliance on those estimates. Granted, it is an estimate, but that falls within a 10% contingency on the project. So when we're looking at the overall cost, that's our consideration when we're putting together a contingency. When you come back at $160,000 plus, that does blow our budget. And as it's been stated, we're a public school. Everything is budgeted. So when you're that far off on the front end, it gives me pause to trust your estimate even at $160,000. How strong an estimate is that number? Or we're going to be back here in a couple of months where that $160,000 is now $200,000 or $250,000.
Sure. So our mistake. I know it's a big one, but we own it. It was a mistake. Getting involved partially through the project, so that's our fault. As far as the current estimate, we received a fixed price proposal from our drilling vendor who we would like to proceed with. Feel very confident in that estimate. They do this kind of work all the time. So I am confident in I think I said 2-week ballpark. We're hopeful it's sooner than that. I can't sit here and promise anything. But I'm confident in an estimate.
And part of the reason why we chose this vendor is it's a fixed price. If they start drilling a hole and at 40 feet hit an old landfill with buried vehicles, let's say, and it took them another 4 months to drill through a bunch of steel and stuff, their price is going to stay the same. They don't have a rock clause, they don't have any sort of clause that we know of that they have. The only estimate would be the Otis employee standing on site.
Well, and that's fair, but as far as Otis goes, did Otis give any consideration to providing a fixed fee to us or not to exceed on that change order for Otis's portion? I mean, that's the point you just made about going with a driller with a fixed rate. It gave some certainty to you, and I guess that's, now what I'm sitting here looking for is some certainty as to what that cost is going to come in at.
Yeah, I mean, I can discuss with my general manager. I can't make that call sitting here today, but we can look at that.
Mr. Lampman, to follow up, and maybe I misunderstood, but earlier in the conversation, when somebody asked about reduced rates, further reduction in rates for the overtime, it sort of was the same answer. I could maybe talk to my manager about that. If we approve this, and you are in fact able to make some agreements for further reduction for overtime, which is for me a personal sticking point, because this is not supposed to be done overtime, right? Now we have no choice. Now we're backed into this position where everything has to be done overtime, and frankly to the disruption of probably some of our neighbors. If we agree to this and you're able to go back and get a further reduction, are we then bound to whatever is stated tonight? Or is there some more, I don't want to prolong this process, but I want to do the best we can with this budget, which is significantly out of control based on what we thought it was going to be.
If I can go back to my GM and get more of a concession, I'm not, if you approve, how it's stated tonight, I'm not going to hold you to that. If we can get I'll honor the low rate if we can do that.
The board could consider approving a not to exceed costs associated with the project based on some of the estimates that we gave. That would be an option. As far as reduction in costs, I would certainly do my best to work with Vern and his group to make sure that we got the best possible price. We have actually had a conversation and asked many of these same questions. We're doing it in front of the public, in front of everybody now for transparency, so everybody knows why we're in this situation, because there is going to be issues. I'm looking at a calendar right now, there's going to be some issues moving forward with that type of timeline.
If you could send that to me, Zach, I would appreciate it, and obviously we can coordinate with the drilling vendor.
Well, we obviously need the project done, so I would say, we need to move forward and, give Mr. Sedgwick, it sounds like you've done a lot of due diligence on the project, so give you the opportunity to make sure we get this thing done, and we'll work on the details moving forward, so.
Yeah, I don't know if we were going to be doing that under new business, I guess, right? So I don't know if we wanted to save that part of the conversation for a little bit further down. Anybody else has any other questions for Mr. Hickson and the rest of the Otis group, or Isaac?
I do think we need to put parameters in. And obviously, we fully trust you to continue the due diligence, but, I've done a lot of contracting and a lot of work, and, 10-20% overage happens quite often. This is, I'm just baffled at how one comes to this from a $35,000 starting.
It's a flat out mistake, which I've admitted. Yeah.
And again, it's a flat out mistake that the school system, public school system for kids, is having to eat.
Sure.
And that's again, the difficult pill to swallow.
Yep.
And that we have to, okay, 150 grand extra.
Okay, anything further?
Yeah, I did have a couple other items.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being willing to come up here and answer those questions. I know that isn't easy. So thank you.
Would you like us to stick around?
Unless you want to hear what their motion ends up being, which is yet to be determined, it's really up to you.
Sure.
So last board meeting, there was reference to our Title VII program, and I just wanted to invite Mrs. Tanya Sproul to this meeting so that she could provide clarification, answer any questions. She's doing a fantastic job. I've spoken about the Title VII program in the past. I'll spare you my long narrative, but Mrs. Sproul knows the Title VII program better than anybody, and she's bold enough to come to the podium. I actually offered that she could just stay in her seat, so she's even willing to stand up there. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask Mrs. Sproul.
Yep. I've been here for 22 years working for the Title VI was Title VII program now, and I pretty much know it inside and out. Also a student of the program in high school too, so I got a lot of history. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
How is it going?
It's going really good. We hit the ground running this year. We have some new hires that started with us, so we are starting right on the get-go.
How has it changed in the last couple of years?
We had a little bit of a hiring issue last year where we couldn't keep a tutoring position filled. So this year we have someone hired right before school started, and looks like they will stay with us for a while before we have to look for another hire. So
You and I spoke at the end of summer, middle of summer, I guess, and I was looking for an estimate of students enrolled. Is it still approximately 220?
I think when I wrote the report last week, we're at about 210, and since then I think we have another 7 students that we've found, so we're about 217. So 220 is about our average year to year.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate, I assume you had that. Yes, thank you. I liked seeing the history of it and how it's progressed. This change, since 2020, the lessons that you're doing, how is that going?
The lessons have been great. We've been going into classrooms, doing whole classroom lessons, not just for Native students, but for non-Native students as well. And they have been going well, and with the new hire, I'm hoping that we can do more lessons this year than we did in years past. So.
It's the 220 students, all the students you're affecting, or just the course?
We focus our tutoring program on the 220 K through 12 students, really specifically in our middle school and high school students, and then the lessons will be affecting all MAP students together. All right, well, I'll let you move along on your board meeting then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. So, just a couple more items and then I'll wrap up. I wanted to start by officially welcoming our two newest principals. First, Dr. Kristen Peterson is our new principal at Gray Verret. She comes to us from Marisa. She's got a long history in our area, very, very great reputation, and we're very excited to have her. And I hope she was paying attention during the elevator conversation, so you can help me schedule Kaufman, which you also work closely with the Kaufman director. Yeah, so anyway, welcome to Dr. Kristen Peterson, Gray Verret principal. Also, a very recent ad, Mr. Brandon Wheeler, coming to us from Grosse Pointe, where he was an assistant principal athletic director at Grosse Pointe South and spent some time in Leland and another area I can't remember, Michigan State grad. Welcome, Mr. Brandon Wheeler, as our new Marquette Senior High School principal. And lastly, under 9B, you're going to be hearing about combi ovens, which, full transparency, I don't know very much about, but Mr. Chris Collins, our food service director, is here, and he does. So if you end up having any questions on that action item, he is here to answer those questions. Thank you, Mr. Collins. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 21st, 2023, the minutes of the board workshop of September 11, 2023, personnel report dated September 2023, and the financial reports of August 2023.
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
All right, motion made by Mr. Sarka, support by Mr. Hewitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, board committee reports. Board Appropriations Committee meeting of September 12th, 2023. Mr. Hewitt, I believe.
Yep, so we met last week. Items discussed, myself, Ms. Ray, and Mr. Zdunek. Items that were discussed were some budget updates provided by Mr. Lampman, the Gray Barrette elevator project, the combi ovens that'll be discussed later as well. And then we also had a good discussion on a topic about our pay-to-play policy for athletics. And we're looking for some more information about what other districts do, our peers, for that type of scenario as well. So more to come potentially on that. The rest, I guess, more detail will be spoken when we get into the action items pertaining to those ones, unless either of you have additions to make.
Good summary.
Okay. Moving on to comments from the public, agenda items only. We have one, but it is for a non-agenda item. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to new business. 9A, consider acceptance of contract addendum from Otis Elevator Company for Gray Barrette Elementary School elevator project.
So we should probably have a motion before discussion, right? Or do you want to just...
Probably a motion.
Well, I guess I'll make a motion that we approve the change order by giving Superintendent Sedgwick some leeway and authority, which we can kind of hash out in some of the details here, maybe in discussion. But again, I don't know if it's appropriate to just pick a dollar amount out of the air and accept as is. If we can get some savings, that would be great. So the motion would be to approve it so we can keep things moving forward, but to maybe grant some authority to the superintendent to make those final determinations on the details.
Okay, do I hear your support?
Support.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mrs. Clip. Further discussion?
Somebody has to wordsmith this, huh?
Well, yeah.
Linda's pretty good at that.
Linda? There you are. Linda.
So,
Yeah, I personally don't know if we need to say not to exceed. I think Mr. Sedgwick would come to us with anything exorbitant. We already kind of have a baseline number. I don't know if it'll do any good to say add something more concrete as far as a do not exceed. And again, especially if there's if Otis is able to come back with something with even further reductions, then maybe, I don't know if there's a point to really get a specific number. We know it has to be drilled, and hopefully we can get it done in the fastest, most efficient, cheapest way possible.
I just have a quick question, and you were probably the only person to answer it. I was wondering this during the presentation. As of right now, we don't have any students who rely on that for mobility, not a single one.
I checked with Dr. Peterson, and she left, but I checked with her before tonight, of course, and we do not currently know.
So what would its most common usage be this year, for instance, just to transport things from first floor to third floor?
Right, there's been multiple instances where we've had to try to get things out of the basement or out of receiving, which is on the ground floor,
Sure.
up to second,
Materials
third floor. Correct, yeah.
Well, good news that kids aren't relying on it.
Well, all it takes is a soccer practice.
That's exactly right.
Kid sprains their ankle, or they're doing motocross and sprain their ankle, and
skiing.
Yeah, teachers, staff slip outside, and there's lots of things that could happen that would need the elevator for sure. I think that we have to get it done.
Well, right.
unfortunately, the bid came in higher than we had wanted to begin with, and then started later than anticipated. But, the bottom line is we need to get it done.
Right.
I think there's actually two issues. There's the language of the change order, which hasn't been approved by Otis Legal. We've made proposals for that. I think giving the superintendent some limits is better for the superintendent. So I think the language with not to exceed is important. He has to come back to us, we have to vote, we're going to have to look at it hard for that reason. So I think the language is to delegate authority to the superintendent to negotiate the change order with regards to both the cost not to exceed, whatever we want to say, not to exceed, but also to negotiate the language in consultation with our legal representation.
So we could amend to, again, 80 hours. Do we just stick with the 160, not to exceed 160? If it exceeds 160, even by $1, we
Right.
can't move forward until we have our next meeting, though, and take action.
Yes. I think so. It gives people incentive to come in under budget. It gives people incentive to come in under budget. And
Well, they're not going to start drilling until October 26th, right? So,
Yeah.
if they figure out that it's going to cost more, we'll have a couple opportunities to try to.
And it shouldn't be on Zach or Jim's shoulders to have to kind of
how
figure
much
that out.
over is enough
exactly.
over? I think
That's on us.
Okay,
But
so
I do just want to say that I appreciate, because I know the time that both Zach and Jim have put into this for the past year, as well as particularly keeping us informed, so that we have been aware of this from all the stages, and that's been invaluable, so that once we got to this point, we were very well informed about the situation, and I really appreciate that, feeling knowledgeable.
Okay, so I'll amend my initial motion to approve moving forward with the project, having Mr. Sedgwick authority to negotiate and finalize the final change order language, and with a not to exceed proposed budget of $160,000.
Support.
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Ms. Ray. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, 9B, consider acceptance of bid from HPS for 2 combi ovens. So I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to accept the bid from HPS for the combi ovens.
I'll support.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Zedunick, support by Ms. Ray. Further discussion.
What do those bids come in at?
54.
Hiawatha was $54,597.82, and then the HPS was $48,724.98.
It's in my packet. You said that last one.
Sure, HPS was $48,724.98. Hiawatha, the other,
Yep.
was, yeah.
Thank you.
What do we make with combi ovens?
Well, I'm sorry. So combi ovens are called combis because they both cook in the convection setting as well as steaming.
Mr. Collins,
Yeah.
would you mind taking the
Sure.
podium, sir? Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Just so we can capture it for video.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Okay, so combi ovens both, they bake food in the convection setting as well as steaming vegetables. We currently have one combi oven right now. When it goes down, it puts us in a really tight spot as far as steaming our vegetables for hot lunch for the students. This gives us a lot of flexibility. So if our current combi oven goes down, we have another resource to continue operations without missing a beat. Now that meals, breakfast, lunch are provided to students, once again at no cost to families, we're expecting to see the number of meals that we're providing increase. Just last week, at the end of last week, we were providing about 2,200 meals per day. I would expect to see that number go over 2,500 meals per day by October. It's just a projection, nothing in stone, but just what I think. Adding that other 2 ovens gives us the ability to be very efficient producing the food, so we can get it out to the schools on time and not be behind schedule.
Are the old combi ovens from 1971 like the elevators?
Well, we currently have deck ovens in their place, and they may be older than 1971.
Wow.
They function just fine, but they don't have the ability to do what a combi oven does.
I have a question. Do we have any idea on estimates on electrical, plumbing, or water to install these ovens?
I do not, but we would follow our standard practice of obtaining at least 3 quotes from approved vendors. We've already began just laying some groundwork with Duquesne. Prime would be another company that we would contact in regards to the plumbing and electrical. So we have companies out there, local companies, that we would ask for quotes on that work.
And I would like to add, this was a planned expenditure.
Yes.
Okay, any further comments?
Thank you very much.
All right, so we have motion and support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 9C, consider naming United Way of Market County a charitable solicitation organization for 2023-2024.
I'll make a motion to name United Way one of our charitable solicitation organizations for the school year.
Support.
All right, motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mr. Sarka. Any comments?
For those who don't know, this just allows employees to make it like an automatic deduction on their payroll to immediately give contributions like on their regular pay cycle if they want to this specific organization. We've only ever named United Way in the previous years. I think we can name more than one.
Other organizations, if they approached us, we would consider it the same way.
Okay, any further comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 9D, consider certification of up to 3 voting delegates and alternates to the MASB Delegate Assembly, which is Thursday, November 9th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Lansing Center in Lansing. I'm planning on attending. Okay. So it
I
sounds
might
like,
be able to join in on that too.
okay.
I'll be heading back this way from below Lamb.
Kristen, how many of us can attend?
We all can go.
We can have 3 voting delegates.
Right. But the entire board could go to the MASB conference.
Okay. And it's November 6th?
9th. So Thursday.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to.
We have a board member van that we're all going to go down in, so It'd be fun.
We
Pick some
could.
show tunes so we have some entertainment.
Okay, so it sounds like there's 4 of us that are interested,
But
so,
we would have, the motion would actually have to be for 3 voting delegates.
right,
That's all,
Yep.
you know, yeah.
yep, so,
And alternates. And an alternate.
yep.
Everyone is voting.
So, I don't know, if someone wants to make a motion for one of the, or for 3 of the 4 that are going to be the actual voting delegates, and then whoever isn't mentioned in that one would be the alternate.
I'll be glad to be the alternate.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to nominate Ms. Kimbenzi, Ms. Ray, Ms. Cheryl Maddox-Smith as the voting delegates, and Mr. Sarka as the alternate to the assembly on November 9th.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mrs. Klipp. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay. Gifts and bequests. Kyle Storm with Storm Insurance Agency, MEMIC, provided lunch for the Back to School PD Collective Efficacy, and a donation of $4,000 from Tourville Apartments fundraiser to MSHS Athletics, which will go toward the Pay to Participate waiver fund. So thank you very much for those. And comments from the public general. Brandy Thomas. Oops.
So, hello, my name is Brandy Thomas. I live at 140 Youngs Road in Sands Township. Most of you know me from various things. Kaufman from most of the boards, so I'll probably be seeing the elevator guys as well. I'm actually here about trying to get the Peter White Public Library as a bus stop, specifically for Bothwell and probably the high school as well. Right now, it's not a bus stop. I know that I've looked into it. I've talked to the transportation department, and the response I've always gotten has been, we don't stop at businesses, but the library isn't a business. The library is part of this city. It is, you know, a city thing. It doesn't charge to be there. It is a free public space. The kids, you know, there's programming there. It's a safe space for kids to go do research, do homework, hang out, etc. I know that bus to that side of town is very full, but talking to the transportation department today, they said all the other buses are not as packed as that one, but they're working on getting something going to make that bus less full. So if that was possible, and I reading the last minutes that new buses have been purchased recently, I read in the last board minutes as well, that I was hoping that as a school district we could get the library as a bus stop. It used to be a bus stop before COVID. During COVID, for obvious reasons, it stopped being a bus stop because, well, we all know there's a few things going on. And it was that way for years with no problems. The other thing that a lot of people that we've gotten feedback from other people in the community is that there's no supervision, but there's no supervision now. You know, my daughter who's in 7th grade at Bothwell can walk out of the door and walk wherever. There's no one monitoring her. There's no one when you get off at the bus, a bus stop, there's the little card that you scan getting off. But once you get off, there's the bus driver isn't making sure the kids go in their house. You know, at middle school and high school level, they don't need supervision. I mean, they still need supervision, but not getting on and off the bus. If parents give permission as a bus stop for children, I don't see why it can't be a bus stop. And a lot of parents feel the same way. It helped a lot of working parents. I'm a school choice parent, obviously, because I live in Sands Township. So it would be exceedingly helpful for me because I have to drive my child to and from school every day. But it's helpful to everyone. And that's pretty much all I had to say. But I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention because Every time we've tried to go to transportation, we've kind of hit a roadblock. Anytime we've approached anyone else, it kind of hit a roadblock. And have you guys considered making it a bus stop again, like it used to be? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to board member comments. We'll start with Mr. Zedunick.
No additional comment.
Mrs. Maddox-Smith.
Well, I wanted to thank Tanya for coming and, answering our questions, walking up to the podium. That's a big deal. Yeah, thank you for being here, and I want to welcome our new principals, taking on some big roles there. That's pretty awesome. Those are some great things. Obviously, the elevator information is a little disappointing for all of us, but hopefully we can move forward with that and do what's best for our kids. I want to thank my board members for all of the work that they put in on this. Obviously, Jim's put tons of hours into this elevator research, and I really appreciate you asking questions and sharing that knowledge. So thank you, everyone.
Ms. Ray.
I just wanted to also kind of convey my thank you for everybody coming and speaking to us on the different issues. I appreciate the thoroughness with which you answered our questions. Very appreciative of that. I do have a statement I need to read, so bear with me. I just think it's just time I address some of these things. So it's been 3 years we've been ignoring certain statements online. Myself, and I will include Jen there, although she will speak for herself if she needs to. And typically I take the high road, and I've just sort of let this kind of pass by me in hopes that it would dissipate. But I think it's important I address the allegations, the lies and the harassment that continue online by a number of individuals targeting both of us. Until now, I've not made a public statement, as I had hoped it would not escalate and would rather have dissipated. However, the lies and harassment have escalated, which could potentially be incredibly damaging, not only to me personally, but my family and those who I work with, but also to both the board and the community. Accusing me on a public forum of jumping on the hood of a police car has crossed a very serious line. I chuckle because that is not something within my expertise or something I would do. But it isn't funny. I've thought about this long and hard, and if even one police officer believes this and is offended and thus possibly unconsciously acting differently in a hypothetical life-threatening situation with regards to me, my family, or those I work with, who knows what the potential consequences could be. There are two things to address here. One is the fact that it is the adults in our community who are role modeling for our children what cyberbullying looks like, as well as spreading misinformation without any fact-checking or due diligence. Second, and just as importantly, is the fact that this could undermine the integrity and honesty, the functionality and legitimacy of both the board and the community who overwhelmingly voted for us. This is potentially detrimental to our entire community, and thus my desire to address it. I'm on this board because I care deeply about all children and our entire community. I'm someone who does not bully others, and if I have done something wrong, I take accountability, apologize, and try to do better. Once I know better, I do better. And yes, I care deeply about social justice and equality, as we all should. It is basic fundamental humanism. It is kindness and caring for all people, raising everyone up. So I would like to address the false claims, the lies, and the harassment that have gone on for far too long. Was I at the Black Lives Matter protests? Absolutely. Was I kicking and spitting on cars? No. Was I jumping on the hood of police cars? No. Was I directing traffic the first day so no one got hurt? Yes, as one can see in the actual videos if they do their due diligence. Was I jumping in between the crowd and a justified angry gentleman who got out of his car? Yes. Was I then screaming at the protesters to back up and telling them to breathe and to not escalate the situation? Yes. Yelling at the protesters. Was I on the phone with the Sheriff, Greg Zybert, that day and every other day because of concern for the safety of the young folks protesting and those driving the cars? Yes, and absolutely I was. Was I down there on the perimeter checking and making sure the young folks in our community were safe? Yes. Was I there checking again when a distraught woman happened to drive into the crowd? Yes. And did I immediately run over so the crowd wouldn't escalate things and then spoke with the woman for 15 minutes until she was calm and could drive home? Yes. Do I care deeply about all people? Yes. I'm the one who defends the bully being bullied. And let me repeat again, was I kicking and spitting on cars? No. Was I jumping on the hood of police cars? No. These assumptions, this continued harassment, these lies could potentially cause mistrust and incredible damage to not just me, my family, and my business, but to our board and our community. I repeat these things again and again because it seems to continue. Words matter, words are powerful. As adults, we should know that and we should know better. So to those spreading lies and harassing me, you can now stop immediately. And if you really don't believe me, please call Sheriff Zybert and ask him, and then call me so that we can have a cup of coffee and I can show you the videos from which that not so attractive photo online of me yelling at the protesters, not the people in the car, came from. The videos tell the whole story, not your assumptions nor your lies. It is time to be the adult role models for our children. It is time to stop the lies, the harassment, the bullying online. It is time to have a conversation. It really is that simple. And I say this to the point where I've been pushed. Otherwise, my lawyer is more than willing to help out here. I've spoken with her, and it's just time for it to stop. Thank you.
Mrs. Klipp.
That will be much briefer. It is unfortunate that for several months on large public forums, I have been accused of felonies, unfounded and meritless. If those allegations were true, it would result in a ruination of my life. I would lose my teaching certificate. My husband, who works in the financial industry, would lose his security license. My life, as I built it with my family, would be over if these things were true. People have really limited understanding of the First Amendment. You can call me names, you can tell me I'm ugly, you can put mean things on large public forums or make fun of how I chew gum. All of that's within your right. Call me a communist. I thought that was funny for somebody who is married to a wealth manager, a staunch supporter of the free market economy. But you can do all of those things. What you can't do under the First Amendment is continue untrue, unfounded, meritless accusations multiple times in front of 28, 29, 30,000 people. Now, we have a difference of opinion on the nickname issue. I recognize that. But like anybody in this room, I'm suspecting, if you come for my family, I'm going to protect it. My husband is going to protect it. I'm going to protect my child, who is still a student in this district and has been harassed by the hearsay that continues to go on endlessly without evidence by a handful of people. And so I too have contacted my attorney. My attorney's looked over the evidence. and it does constitute harassment. So I've sent some notices personally, privately, because that's how I handle things, and asked to please cease and desist for my child's well-being, for my husband's livelihood, and for the 22 years I put into educating the public's children, which is my passion and what I focus on every day. Not to mention that it absolutely undermines the integrity of this board. So, I am hopeful, now that these things are cleared and parameters are set, that we will act within the boundaries of the law when we disagree. But as somebody who's worked with adolescents for 22 years and watched, been part of, been educated on mental health with students, with adolescents, who has taken more professional development on social media and cyberbullying, this community suffered a tragedy 15 months ago because of cyberbullying. It made worldwide news. And then I see adults doing it? Consistently? Call me ugly. Make fun of me. I don't care. It hurts. You're trying to hurt me, it hurts, sure. But do not continue to allege that I'm a criminal who should be imprisoned. Please do not do that. I have the evidence. I have the screenshots. I'm certain now that this is on public record, which is embarrassing that even has to be said, that we will be clear and we will act within the law. I love this community. I love the fact that I was elected. Jen and I were elected by over 11,500 combined votes. Please let us do our job. And please contact me if you disagree with me. But please stop harassing me. Thank you.
Mr. Hewitt.
Just because I don't think that they were mentioned yet, I just want to extend another thank you to Kyle Storm and the Tourville Apartments for their donations. And that's all.
Mr. Sarka.
Thank you. I would repeat what Mr. Hewitt said about the donations. We get these and we mention them. Let me get a little bit closer. It's just amazing that we have a community that continues to support our schools. We talk about the Kaufman family, and this is just a further example of how much support we have in the community. I want to just also support my fellow board members, Ms. Klipp and Ms. Ray, but beyond that, Mr. Hewitt and Ms. Kambenzi and Mr. Zadunek, Cheryl, everybody on this board. I don't know if the perception out there is that we're just living it up, being board members, and we just, we're doing it for the power, we're doing it for the glory, or we're doing it because we really like hearing about Otis elevators and holes that are out of camber or whatever. But we're doing this with a very strong sense of duty and obligation that not everybody in the community, takes on. Now that doesn't mean we're beyond, criticism. Absolutely. I mean, it comes with being a public servant, and but I would echo what both Jen Ray and Jen Klipp said, is that this is Marquette. Have a cup of coffee, have a beer, drive carefully if you have the beer, but reach out and talk to somebody. One of the, I guess, saving graces of this is this whole process has been actually talking to people in person. I'd much rather deal with Shelley Garnsey in person and talking to her about her twin sisters and her mom and dad and people we grew up with and talk about the issue that we don't disagree with than finding out secondhand about what's been said on Facebook. You know, Shelley and I have had some really good conversations, and it's been very helpful. You don't gain anything by, and we've seen this throughout the debate, people come to meetings and talk as if we've followed their Facebook pages and we know what the heck they're talking about. And most often they're in halfway through a conversation we've been no part of, and it makes no sense. And it's not a way to run a school district, and it's not a way to be a community. And that's really what it comes down to is, and if there's ever been a time for Marquette, coming out of COVID and coming out of this issue that we just went through, to try to think about what is it to be a community again, now's the time to do it, right? We've made a change. We're moving on. We've got 12 years of students looking to us to make a difference and looking to us to kind of make their future fruitful and productive. And it's up to us adults to turn the page and move on. You know, we don't, and I may have touched on this before, but one of the greatest things about this job is to go to graduation. And I haven't heard one graduation speech that talks about the past and how we're going to do things like we used to, and you know, the future, the class of 2023 is essentially what our parents wanted the class of 83's future to be. It's about their future and what they're going to do. And for the most part, what that requires? It requires an elevator that works. It requires something called the combi oven. You know, and mundane, you know what, like that. Let's get back to that. There's a lot of educating to do. There's a lot of supporting to do. And let's just move on and do those things. Let's get through a year of just focusing on those things. Shut off Facebook. Just move on and see what we can get done. We need to win a couple more football games, too. So we need to show up and support that as well. I can't prevent people from saying things on Facebook. I don't look at Facebook, and that's been a blessing. Come to us with your issues. Come to us to talk to us. It has been, even though some people were disappointed in the ultimate decision, we listened to those. We may not have been convinced by them, but we listened to those. All of us on this board have put in more time, I would imagine, on that singular issue than a lot of board members from a lot of other districts have put in on their entire board responsibilities, because we took it seriously. So that is an appeal. I guess it's also just a challenge and a request that people look to the opportunities we have in the year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years going forward, rather than looking at the mess that it seems like the last couple of years have been. Thank you.
Board president comments. I just want to thank this board for putting in the work and, you know, dealing with some of the hard stuff. You know, we had a board retreat on September 11th, and we had the entire board there. That was the first time, I think, since I've been on the board that we've had the entire board there for a workshop. You know, I mean, we're all busy people. We all have lives of our own, and, you know, we still put in the time and the effort to make sure that we're doing the best for the district that we can. So I just wanted to really thank the board and our superintendent and Linda and Jim down there, and all of our staff and everybody for, you know, putting in the work and showing up every day to make this district what it is. So I guess that's all I have to say. So announcements and other meetings. This week is homecoming week. September 21st is the Pendle Wall ceremony at MSHS at 5:30. October 2nd is our first Committee of the Whole meeting. here in the library at 5:30. Is it? That was 5:30, okay. October 16th, 2023 is our PD Day, no school for students. And it is also our next board meeting here in the library at 5:30. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can I get some support? Mrs. Maddox-Smith. All right, motion made by Mr. Hewitt, support by Mrs. Maddox-Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. If I could have the board members stick around for 1 second.